An ailing economy, load shedding, household debt, unemployment and a ballooning government debt are some of the challenges facing South Africa as the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will be delivering the budget speech later today. While the government has been saying eradication of the triple scourge of poverty, inequality and unemployment is paramount and an urgent priority, this has proved to be evasive for many years now. The Budget Justice Coalition says the assessment of debt and possibilities for revenue raising to counterpose the need for austerity are some of the urgent areas that the government should prioritise. Well, let's continue this conversation. We've got Lerato Nkosi, a senior economics lecturer at Unisa and member of the Budget Justice Coalition, Dominic, who are joining us to talk and give us their perspectives ahead of the budget speech this afternoon. Thank you, both of you, for being with us here on Morning Live.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne.
Dominic, let me begin with you, because we have been saying this is an exceptionally tough one, because for more reasons than one. I think we've outlined the difficulties that South Africa's economy is going through, a lack of growth, jobs that are falling by the wayside, load shedding, you name it. We have problems in every direction you turn, but the reality is we're also in an election year. So the minister has to satisfy the needs of the voters and try and fix the country. So what are you forecasting?
I'm forecasting more of the same, unfortunately, Leanne, where we will see what government calls fiscal consolidation, or what the rest of us activists and those in progressive or heterodox economists call austerity. And this is where government is cutting spending dramatically in order to prioritize debt repayments. And this is in a context where National Treasury and government is arguing that we are running out of cash and facing a debt crisis. However, it must be said that in the first instance, South Africa is far from running out of cash. And secondly, we are not in face of debt distress. Reason being, whilst we see growing levels of debt and a growing debt to GDP ratio, it's favorable that a large level of this debt, 90% of it, is owed in rands as opposed to in foreign exchange. Secondly, some of this debts are in fact owed to other South African institutions. One example would be the Government Employees Pension Fund, which borrows to government and government institutions at market-related interest rates. It can potentially take a haircut given the significant resources or accumulated reserves of some of the assets, which brings me to my third point, which is that while South Africa has growing debt levels, at the same time we have a burgeoning asset base, where if we look at the entire balance sheet of the country, we are in a very positive situation where we have profits accumulating on the gold and foreign exchange contingency reserves account of close to 500 million rand, or billion rand, sorry. We have possibilities of tapping into either the surpluses or the accumulated reserves of the GPF, which currently stands at 2.4 trillion rand in accumulated reserves, and makes a surplus of around 46.6 billion rand each year for the past 10 years. So what it can do is it can provide a payment holiday to the state on some of the debt service costs that it's paying back to the GPF to create greater fiscal room to invest in pertinent social spending areas like healthcare, education, and social protection.
Yeah.
Over and above that, and this is where I'll stop, is that there are additional resources that could potentially be tapped into that's currently not being put on the table.
All right, so Lerato, let me come to you now. I mean, I know we talk to debt and we talk about what a bad situation we're in, but I mean, let's put it in simple terms. And I actually found this point from Efficient Group's Davi Ruud quite interesting. I mean, he broke it down quite interestingly, saying that if you want to look at how much money South Africa owes, just imagine that every single South African, and we're talking what, about 60 million, if we go by the population, 61 million, every single person in this country is in debt of 70,000 rand. So you put that all together, and that's kind of what South Africa owes. And it's just growing and growing and growing. Now, in terms of cutting on spending, I'm not sure we're going to see government doing that because there are too many problems. So they've got to find this money elsewhere. Income tax, VAT, there's a small tax base. Where are they going to find this money? And that's the big question that I think everybody is waiting for. Where do you find the money?
Leanne, for me, I think the only solution for the government is to increase its debt even more. Because we know definitely that the increases, for instance, in the social relief of distress grant, the increase of the number of people who are getting it definitely comes from the debt that is incurred in the country. But also, what is important to note is that South Africans, the ones who are working, are the ones that are carrying the country when it comes to spending. So what do I mean? I mean, for instance, in the last quarter, what I mean is that in the last quarter, unemployment in the expanded definition was 41.3%. So generally, if you make a great assumption or a great rounding off, that means only 60% of the country is working and only 60% of the country can be able to collect personal income tax from, for instance. And then we also know that the 10% of the country is wealthy. So that means they don't really fall under those who are carrying so much of the debt in South Africa or so much of the public spending. So that means 50% of those who are working in our country are the ones that are carrying your child social grants, your social relief of distress grant, and most of them are the working class, the black middle class.
Yeah, and that's the area that the finance minister knows if they increase that, and we see people getting more. Obviously, this will improve the lives of people. But the bottom line is it does cost the state more. But this is an election year. So by doing that, chances of people electing the government back in power are good. So he knows this. And yet this is costing the state, and it's costing a lot of money. And so when you speak to economic people and economists such as yourself, they say, which is interesting to see how you're saying borrow more, but they're saying we have to cut back on the borrowing and we need to cut government spending by at least 30%, if that's at all possible. Do you agree with this kind of sentiment? Lerato, I'm going to stay with you on this one.
Oh, okay. My challenge is that the reality is that even though we can cut spending, there's a lot of areas where we do need to spend. So, for example, I'll give you the example of load shedding. Last year, the minister did announce that in order to solve or incentivize a lot of business with regards to load shedding, he will be giving a decrease in the taxable income for business, and he'll be giving them a decrease of 125%. So that is some kind of solution to load shedding, and I believe that it can relieve the government from extending your state guarantees, because it can assist a lot of business and a lot of households to move to renewable energy. A key example is Harmony Gold. Harmony Gold is one of the companies, your big companies that have already gone off the grid, and they've already established their own solar system for their production. So that is just one way in which spending can be cut in terms of Eskom.
Okay, all right. Dominic, I'd love to get your views on this one, because I'm looking at your facial expressions on the sideline. I'm not sure if you agree with this.
So, sorry, Leanne, there's a first couple of things that needs to be addressed before I get to this. Dabi Rood's comparison of the state's budget to a household budget is a misnomer. You shouldn't be comparing the state's debt to a household debt and dividing it by the population. It's incomparable. The state's debt can be used to in fact drive investment and industrialization, which it hasn't been. Number two, the state can find a range of alternative measures to finance that debt. And in fact, I'm in agreement with Lerato that it's possible to take out concessional domestic debt as opposed to foreign debt to increase the debt levels. But that's not even necessary, although it's possible to do so. Secondly, it's important to say that in as much as government's debt has been increasing, as I've been saying, we are in fact not in a debt crisis. Number three is on the issue of where money can be found. And it's important to say that we need a lot more investment in healthcare, education, and a range of other key social spending areas. And where we can, for example, find the money in the first instance is through reviewing tax rebates. Now, one of them is the one that Lerato spoke about, and I disagree in that, in the first instance, I should say, that we forfeit about 150 billion in foregone revenue through these tax rebates. Most of them are going to affluent individuals. Medical aid rebates, pension fund and retirement annuity rebates. And then in addition, there is, of course, the tax concessions for household solar PV and for businesses. Now, whilst Lerato says this reduces the risk on the state, in fact, it adds the risk onto the state in that it will accelerate the death spiral of the public utility. In so doing, creating greater debt levels for Eskom, which invariably is guaranteed to be paid back by the state, and is a range of contingency reserve. So you must understand,
Dominic, I need to unfortunately interrupt you there. We've got to take a break here on the program. I'm so sorry, I can't control the timing here, but I think some unbelievably interesting points brought forward by our guests. I could speak to them for a long time and differ on quite a few of them, but maybe you agree. I'm not too sure, but I got to leave it there. Lerato Nkosi, Senior Economics Lecturer at Unisa, with the member of the Budget Justice Coalition, Dominic Brown, sharing their perspectives ahead of the budget. Let's take that break.